Good evening, my friends. I'm Erica Lukes, and this is Expanding Frontiers Research. You can support our work by going to expandingfrontiersresearch.org, become a Patreon member, and help us with our show and the incredible work that we do with FOIA requests and investigating different areas. My friend, colleague from Expanding Frontiers, Jack Brewer, is going to be on the show this evening. I want to say hello to Peter. I want to give a shout out to Bill. It's always wonderful to see both of you here and to know that you are incredible at supporting us, and we've created a nice community. That means the world to me. I also want to give a little bit of an update. A couple weeks ago, I appeared in 3rd District Court, and I had an opportunity to read my victim's impact statement over the horrific abuse that I suffered and the stalking and harassment at the hands of Christian Marks. And I tried to stress my 3-year ordeal, and also the fact, relay, as the court should have known, that there was another victim that was assaulted and more protective order violations were disregarded. And so it was a very interesting day. I'm going to be, as I collect more information out about everything that took place, including I've received the audio recordings from from several court dates, as I put things forward and show to the world that local law enforcement did not enforce protective orders on my behalf, putting me and my family in danger. As a result, Mr. Marks was able to go out and assault another person and put that person in danger and the community. As it stands right now, the Utah National Guard has blocked him from any military installation because of the threats allegedly that he leveled against them. Law enforcement here has flagged him because of the threats they perceive against him. They're worried about their security. And throughout all of this, even though I've told law enforcement and the National Guard that I was concerned for their safety, they have had virtually no concern for my safety, as will be evident when I come forward with more information about this. I want to just say to all of you, thank you for the behind the scenes love and support, for checking in on me, making sure that I'm okay. It means the world to me. I've needed that because this has been a very trying time in my life. I'm still obviously very concerned for my safety and the safety of the community at large. And so I just want to say thank you very much. Without further ado, thank you. I'm going to add UFO Sunset. Thank you. And Amy, hi guys. Thank you so much for all of your love and support and your kind comments. Yeah, Jack Brewer is here. Jack Brewer is on the board of Expanding Frontiers Research, and Jack has been doing for how many years have you been in this subject? I've asked you this a million
times. It's been a few summers now. Yeah. I started a UFO blog in 2010, so let's just call that the starting line, I guess.
Really? Doesn't it feel like it's been like 100 years?
It does. It does. A lot of things have shifted over that time in a lot of different ways. And let me start, please, by thanking you for having me.
Absolutely.
And offering my empathy with your ongoing domestic violence situation, the cases. And I know that the courts can be a very difficult place to expect justice. And I want to echo Erica's appreciation for the folks that have publicly and privately offered support to her about the ongoing situation. I know she appreciates it, and I want to voice my concern and support about that as well.
Thank you, Jack. And you know, you have been, Expanding Frontiers has been very meaningful to me and our collaboration. And, you know, that's been very helpful to kind of keep me centered and to help give me something positive to focus on. So I thank you for your partnership and your friendship, and just to, you know, all of the wonderful conversations that we've had. I really do think that you are a voice in this subject, that a much needed voice in this subject. And there are not too many. I can think of maybe like 3 I know that Bill Pullen is here. I know Peter. There's some great people that are actually taking the time to stand up and talk a little bit about the subject and shine a light on areas that need to be addressed. It is a deeply fascinating subject. I think that's why we've been so involved in it over the years. But as you and I have talked about on many different shows, our ideas and opinions have changed due to the fact that we both really enjoy and understand the importance of doing deep dives into things, to look at things in a not from a face value perspective, because this subject is so fraught with landmines and people that are grifting and political motivations that we've seen and you've documented in your books decade after decade of people who were aligned with specific political parties and ideas, racist ideas, different things, and you are definitely a shining voice. I feel like I should sing a song now.
Well, thank you. That's very generous and gracious of you. As you all know, we'll be welcoming Tim Binall to the show here in a little bit. And I point that out right now because if I thought of two people that are in my actual social circles that have just talked to everybody, know everyone in the paranormal circles, got a going old school here, but got a Rolodex to just, if you bring up a name, they can say, here they are. What do you want to know? It would be Erica and Tim. So I'm looking forward to our conversation later. And thank you, Erica, for your gracious compliment and encouragement, which kind of segues us to, I wanted to spend our first segment tonight talking some about the new stuff at the blog, and you're kind of segueing us into our most recent blog post about some of the people in the orbit of NICAP. Want me to just continue with that?
Just keep on rolling, Jack.
Sure. I have my iced coffee, so that's why usually about an hour in, I'll get on like a 15-minute rant that I'll
really? These are good things to know.
I'm trying to pace myself here a little bit. But
then it's like, all bets are off when the caffeine hits in.
That's right. Ever since as Erica was inferring with the blog that I used to write, that now I kind of transferred it over to Expanding Frontiers. I've been doing ongoing FOIA requests on different people involved with NICAP and in the NICAP circles. And that's actually how I came to write the book Wayward Sons, NICAP, and the IC, was because I had compiled so much material that I found really interesting. And then when Barry Greenwood helped me get my eyes on some NICAP archives, a lot of stuff fell into place. And the basic storyline there is that some CIA assets were very involved in American affairs, ranging from the China lobby and trying to influence the United Nations to Hollywood. We just got the FBI files and posted them at our Patreon and then at Expanding Frontiers blog. The files on a man named Carlton Alsop, who at one point was considered the CIA's most valuable asset in Hollywood. He was Judy Garland's manager during her attempted suicide and that critical 1950 timeframe. And that's right, dead on the timeline that we're looking at of when a man named Joseph Bryan III, who went on to be a very influential member of the Board of Governors of NICAP, was operating a political and psychological warfare unit for the CIA and the State Department. And Carlton Alsop was on his crew, as was the notable E. Howard Hunt, as were a number of people that in the book I go into quite a bit of detail on the extent that I've been able to find out about each of them. And it creates a very intriguing set of circumstances that we just don't typically hear about in UFO circles. And that was one of the things that I became interested in Erica's show and the work she was doing, is that I heard her and her guests talking about how it's documented and common knowledge among the old timers that Donald Kehoe was a racist. And that was relatively confirmed, certainly inferred in my research as well, that he was very supportive of Lindbergh and different fascist movements, at least adjacent to them. And it's not hard to find at all. And so then when we couple these political circumstances and the psychological warfare unit with the dance that the CIA was doing with NICAP, with the American public, it's very interesting to me, and arguably the story as compared to the MUFON of its day that just compiled hundreds and hundreds of sighting reports that arguably don't really amount to anything. I almost feel like I should apologetically say that, but am I wrong about that, Erica?
Nope.
I can even empathize with Donald Kehoe and Richard Hall, for instance. During the mid-1960s, they amassed thousands and thousands of reports, and Richard Hall edited them into a book of their best evidence. And I can empathize at the time that it felt new, perhaps, to Richard Hall. I'm not as convinced that Donald Kehoe's motives were as concerned about extraterrestrial life as he always put forth. But
right.
I'm not going to necessarily accuse him of anything otherwise. But I'm just not altogether convinced of that. But I do think that some people like Richard Hall and Gordon Lohr were probably sincerely interested in extraterrestrials, or we could say certainly some of the NICAP personnel were.
Right. Let me interrupt you right there. Let's
always kind of struck.
Sorry, let me just interrupt you there really quickly. And I want to just say, for people that are new to our audience who don't really understand, or getting into the topic, a lot of them probably don't have an idea of NICAP, about the organization, when it was started, and how it has changed over the decades. So could you just give us a brief snippet on NICAP, explaining that to newer people?
Yeah, even that is complicated. The summary would be that NICAP was incorporated in late 1956, and it went through a tumultuous period right off the bat where it changed directors, went through 3 treasurers in 3 months. Donald Kehoe landed in the hot seat and hung on to it for about 13 years, I believe, if memory serves. In that time, created what was the largest civilian UFO organization to date by membership. They had, I think, like 14,000 or something at one point of what they called subscribers that subscribed to their newsletter and paid, for that. And it was an incredible marketing plan that really can't be done today. That you get people to subscribe, and for money you mail them news about what you're learning. And they had enough subscribers at one point that they had a larger staff than Project Blue Book did, that was supposed to be investigating UFOs. So that's kind of the summary. It gets much more detailed in my book, and I'll warn you though about my book, Wayward Sons. I was not interested in UFOs. It's not a UFO book. I was interested in the relationships between NICAP personnel and the intelligence community, which are often one and the same. A lot of intelligence personnel were in NICAP, and people were always questioning if it was truly even a civilian organization. But that's the gist of it. And our latest blog post is a continuation of all of this as we continue to get files that were never processed and released before. It's why it has taken years to get these records processed under the Freedom of Information Act and available to give to our supporters and our audience.
Right. Thank you very much for letting me take you off track there, just so we could explain that for people, because NICAP, obviously we've both studied that and interviewed people involved with that. As you mentioned, you've got the wonderful book that you wrote about NICAP, and I think that it is a fascinating organization, especially when you're putting that when you look at what's happening today in the current situation. You see same types of very interesting people coming up with, military backgrounds or alleged military backgrounds, and, different figures in the intelligence community and whatnot. But who knows? We'll talk about that when we bring Tim in. But very fascinating stuff going on currently in the subject. So.
Yeah, it actually even seems to be advantageous to the current crowd of UFO influencers for people to not be aware of the history of the topic and what happened with NICAP in the 1960s and what happened with MUFON in the 1990s and things like that. And with NICAP, I can empathize that some of them were certainly sincere and interested in UFOs. And they compiled this book of what they thought were hundreds of their best cases that occurred within a few years of time. And looking back at that, I can empathize with their urgency and their enthusiasm at the time. But I'm also, in hindsight, thinking, so did they honestly think that there were just hundreds of cases of extraterrestrials flying around? Like, they must have to sincerely believe that. You would have to think that there's just an infestation of extraterrestrials on the planet. So I'm not really sure what they were thinking thinking there. I'm not sure the strategy of overloading Congress and the American public with hundreds and hundreds of cases was the right strategy. I can understand it though. I think that groups do that because they don't have one definitive case. So they try to make this mountain of evidence that history has shown us a lot of bad evidence doesn't make a good case.
Absolutely. And, that's what I find, so fascinating. And William is making a great point. Good majority of the UFO subculture is it feels the same way today. And it is very interesting to see political figures, coming out and challenging people and trying to throw a wrench into, a time period where we actually should be doing business for America, for our country, and getting things done. But we've got these games that are taking place that are absolutely, unbelievably, in my opinion, ridiculous, embarrassing, dangerous. So I definitely, I think this is, what happened back in the late 60s was so tame compared to what we're seeing now, which is just fascinating. It's like, I don't know. I mean, how do you compare the two yourself?
I think the behavior is essentially the same, but I think the technology, the ability to get a message to people, the news cycles being so instantaneous and short, is much different than it was 60, 70 years ago. I think that we used to read a newspaper once a day. We used to watch a half hour of news once a day. Now we just scroll constantly. We get something new to be outraged or fired up about anytime you want, really. If you want to just pick up your phone and find something now, you can find a rabbit hole to go down. And someone on Twitter this week, I thought, made a really good point, or articulated what a lot of us have been alluding to, in that some of the worst members of Congress right now are getting good coverage from a credulous media that wants clicks and just wants to put their sensational UFO statements up. And this is really helpful to these members of Congress because it gets them in front of the demographic they want, which are conspiracists. And I thought that was a really interesting correlation there. It's not just publicity that they want, it's publicity among people that are arguably challenged emotionally and in certain areas, as we keep seeing, for instance, with these January 6 people that continue to be convicted and sentenced on a daily basis almost.
Right. I mean, the whole thing is so fascinating. And it is, as you know, from my own personal experience, having been married to an oath keeper, just watching that conspiratorial mindset in action, of watching people that are being manipulated. And I mean, that to me has been, you would hope that people would have some better judgment and understand that, here you've got case after case or example after example of in every way that, our country, our values, everything that we hold dear, are being threatened, but we're just going to go along with it. And not only that, we're regurgitating, we're becoming useful idiots for promoting propaganda that is not even, in some cases, coming from the United States, which is just, again, so insane that people aren't getting a grip. Hopefully they will. But I think the UFO world, especially right now, is a way for grifters, for some people with very questionable backgrounds and people that are trying to manipulate politics. They can slip right in, as we've seen with some of these people, and use the UFO conspiracy to stoke anger and hate. And it's a really fascinating time.
Yes, it is. And that kind of segues us into something else I wanted to update our viewers and listeners on a little bit is, as many of you know, a couple of years ago, we broke a story on Phenomicon, which is a paranormal themed conference in Vernal, Utah. It's an annual 3-day event. And the story we broke was when we found out that it is county sponsored. This last year, 2023, was budgeted for $215,000. And there's a lot of different things that we have considered and explored through our blog posts in this. The latest chain of events involved a series of grandma requests. That's the Utah Act for Public Records. It's kind of the Utah FOIA equivalent. And so through a series of grandma requests and appeals, we obtained unredacted contracts for Phenomicon with its speakers, or what they call their talent agreements. The redacted contracts we had received showed the speaker fees for these different speakers and their names, but virtually everything else of the 3-page contracts was redacted. We appealed that to the State Records Committee, and they unanimously agreed with us that it is the intent of the grandma for the public to know how its business is being conducted. And that was our argument all along, was that Uinta County lacked the authority to exempt from disclosure the payment and conditions of contracting with talent and people that they were paying for services rendered. EFR continues to be a bit concerned that there have never been any protocols published, in spite of several questions about it, as well as grandma requests about how these talents are identified as to who gets paid X amount, who gets 2X, who gets 3X, who gets invited as compared to who has to pay a fee to have just a vendor table or something like that. We've never been shown this. And again, I would like to please emphasize the relevance here is when it is the county conducting the conference. If it's private and you want to do it yourself, you can run it any way you want. When it's public, the very essence of the GRAMA, of the Freedom of Information Act, is that it's public record who the municipality is doing business with and what they're paying them. So we published these records that we have received, and part of what had been redacted in the past was a formula for how these speakers can select speakers can earn 4, 5, up to 6 times in some instances what their speaker fee is. And the way they do that is through what the county and its organizers call add-on events. At those events, like VIP breakfast, guided tours to Skinwalker Ranch gates and things of this nature, the speaker can earn up to 50% of what the Phenomenon attendees will pay. So that had been redacted in the past, and we can now see that. We reached out to people for comment on this. Among the most highly paid people, the people that profit most from it, are cast members of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. As one would expect, the conference taking place in Vernal and Northeast Utah, it relies heavily on the talent, one might say, of the people on The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. Travis Taylor has never responded to our request for comment. Thomas Winterton has occasionally. He did not respond by the time we had published our last blog post. However, he did email us a few days afterwards and expressed displeasure with the way that we report on Phenomenon. He has made similar insinuations in the past, and we have a blog post up about specifically what he emailed us most recently, where he threatened EFR with, quote, legal action, unquote. So there's that. It continues to seem apparent to me that Thomas Winterton, who is one of the organizers of Phenomenon, as well as some of the county officials, do not understand the responsibilities of the handling of public funds and the transparency required. For instance, Mr. Winterton expressed that he did not like having his personal finances published. What I don't think Mr. Winterton understands is that he makes that decision when he enters into a contract with the county. That's not a Jack Brewer or EFR thing. That's a grandma and public records and sunshine laws type of thing. Similarly, Leisha Colthart, who is the director of Uinta County's Office of Travel and Tourism, she recently explained, can you hear me okay?
I can. There's a little bit of a glitch that's
Okay.
happening on my end as well. So.
Okay, well, I'll just proceed. At any rate, Leisha Colthart recently explained to the county commissioners that they were changing the contracts, and it is, as she explained to the county commission, it's part of the grandma that this has to be public. And she explained to them the people that they contract are actors on paranormal shows, and that's why they refer to them as talents. The commission seemed to really not understand, would be one interpretation of what's been taking place at Phenomenon, is they were asking, is this a talent show or what are you doing? So they don't seem clear on what's been taking place. Maybe they should watch Fox News and read some of our reports on it if they need to know a little better. But that's basically what's been going on with Phenomenon. I don't think that the organizers and the people that object to our reporting really understand the grandma and the public records laws. And they have not provided us with a pointed, detailed direct communication to Expanding Frontiers about exactly what we got wrong and what they would like reframed. So, I mean, we really don't have anything to say at this point other than we stand by our reporting and are just reporting what we get in public records.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very key thing. And if you go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org to become a Patreon to help support our work, and to also to read the wonderful blogs that the research that we're putting forward and the FOIA requests that we're getting and sharing with the public. I mean, this is, reading this story is very, the second to last blog post is very interesting, with the threats of legal action. I'm not, as I think anybody that is familiar with the law or with being a public figure, it is incredibly difficult, to take action against somebody, especially when they're a public figure. And also, everything, like you say, everything we do is above board with what we're putting forward. This is public information. This is information that should be accessible, and this information should be transparent to taxpayers, to the people that are funding these, to the public who, and so there really is nothing of merit in some of these threats that are being leveled. But
yeah, I mean, the bottom line here is we are requesting and obtaining public records. In some cases, we appeal when my experience with public records laws tells me they're not in a position to redact that. I mean, that's not what the exemptions are for. And the bottom line is, proponents of Phenomenon say the cost to the county is offset by the ticket sales. It's offset by the revenue raised at the add-on events. It brings money to the area through tourism. The opponents and the critics say that really isn't documented as well as some of the proponents claim it is, and that money that gets invested, that gets underwritten to sell those tickets and to pay these speakers and to use the conference center, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, isn't necessarily being shared by the public, but more by a select few speakers and participants in the event. And that, as we have maintained all along, is a major issue with public records. Is we would like to see the process of how these speakers are identified and selected, and the process of how financial compensation is arrived at. We have a great deal of discrepancy just from one speaker to another, even just what their speaker fee is, never mind who gets that added commission, for lack of a better word, of add-on events. So these are issues for the county to sort out, for the organizers to sort out, if they want to be in compliance with best practices as described by people like the gentleman that we interviewed in our first blog post that formerly worked with the Department of Justice and is currently a college educator, that explained this to us. And that's where I get that information from.
Right. And I want to just mention that our work with this subject, Phenomenon, the records request, was recognized by the Utah Investigative Journalists. And that is for me, being a Utah native and understanding the importance of what they do and the the people that are associated and working on behalf of this nonprofit can't be understated. This is an exceptional organization. And so for us to receive that recognition for our work on Phenomicon, and also to have Fox 13 also do a story about this as well, thanks to the work that we have done. And I'm very happy that they have focused on that as well. I mean, these are we're being this is an important thing, because other people who are way outside of this topic, the UFO topic, whatever we're dealing with, they understand there's a larger issue here, and that is the lack of transparency, the potential misuse of funds, and as you mentioned, the funding going to key people that are making quite a bit of money off of this. And how does that affect the community? I know that when the conference that I went to up there, and it was not Phenomicon, but I know that I was, you go to a conference and you're in an environment where you're a captive audience for 8 hours of the day. You go there, you see the speakers, you have vendors that are with food trucks outside. You're not going out into the community. You're not shopping at local stores to support the local economy. You're going in and staying at a hotel that is a chain-owned hotel a lot of the times in that area. And so how is that really stimulating the local economy? And how can they actually distinguish whether the tourism that is coming into the area, which is this is a time when people are vacationing. It's the end of summer. There are, as I had talked with people at different hotels that were managing different hotels in the area, the one thing that I was told is it would be difficult to track to see who was coming in to go to the local monuments, to go to Dinosaur, National Park, to see all the wonderful things that are attractions in that area. How do you track that? And how are they tracking that to make the bold claims that they're making?
Right. And I can tell you, as we demonstrated in our last blog post, or 2 blog posts ago, about the unredacted contracts, the fact of the matter is that if we look at that a 3-month period, Phenomicon takes place in September. If we look at August, September, and October, September was the only month in Vernal that taxable sales actually dropped from 2022 to 2023. They actually dropped while the surrounding months increased. So, it's very difficult to say that you can look at this kind of data and conclusively say that the event is enhancing the local economy. And all of that aside, a significant issue remains the conflict of interest that is created when a county government is basically getting in the UFO business. And what makes this conference different than the Roswell event or the event they have in Oregon, things like that, is that presenters come to this event and claim to be doing scientific investigation with scientific instrumentation. Those claims are doubtful to unverified at best. It creates a classic conflict of interest when people claiming to be doing scientific research have financial incentives to make sensational statements about unverifiable phenomena. So there's a lot on the table here. We can make it as simple as it's just public records laws. I mean, we can just start there, that if you do business with the county, your contracts are subject to public release, public to disclosure. So, I mean, it's as simple as that, or it can get as complex as we want to talk about it, that the county is paying people to make unsubstantiated statements under the guise of scientific investigation.
Right. And as we've, talked about before, I mean, there are serious repercussions for promoting things that are not backed up with fact. That's I think that we've when I've talked time and time again about people who have been who have had serious mental health issues, who are believing things. We've seen the news. I mean, there's a news story once a week about people that are believing fictitious claims and are really in a very fragile condition that either are harming themselves or harming other people. And I think when you've got this kind of mix, as we've talked about for a long, long time, when you've got people who are promoting, thanks to the state, this type of information, this is just not even based in fact, but is actually, I believe, dangerous for people. There's got to be a level of responsibility. Are we a state where we're really truly living life elevated? Are we a state that is, promoting the wonderful things that we have to see here? I mean, Utah is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. We have a rich history, a very interesting history, and there are many national parks and places that deserve to have money, that are things that we can share with the community, with people that are traveling from overseas to visit these wonderful places. And we should be, in my opinion, presenting information that is based in fact and not promoting dangerous belief systems for people that are having challenges. I think that goes back to, and this is, that goes back to the leadership. That goes back to people who are the head of the Utah tour and travel tourism. Is that really what you want to represent in our state? I think that's, in and of itself, is pretty sad statement.
Yeah, and it ties into more research we're doing that we will certainly be keeping folks aware of as it progresses. One of the things we're doing at our Patreon, the EFR Patreon, there are some public posts there that you don't have to join or pay to see, and these are about how to submit public records requests, FOIA requests, and then how to read them when you start getting responses. And we're willing to help facilitate that and help you with your requests and how to interpret things that you're told and the records you receive thereafter. There's a lot that goes into it. So we're willing to help and guide you through the process. Your financial support helps us do this. There are fees associated with obtaining records from law enforcement agencies, especially localized. There are fees sometimes with the FOIA when we are obtaining records that have never been released before. When they haven't been previously released, they must be processed, and that requires a FOIA officer to go through and read line by line what might be dozens, if not hundreds of pages, and apply the exemptions. And that's what we've been studying in our posts, is what these exemptions are and how they apply and how you read them. We'll eventually get to how you appeal them and how you try to make an argument about whether the exemption may have not applied. And that's what EFR has been doing in some cases in Utah, as well as some with the FBI and with the Securities and Exchange Commission, and sharing those records that we obtain with you folks. So you can get to our Patreon by going to expandingfrontiersresearch.org. If you go to our website, you can get to all of our stuff right there on the landing page. You can go over to our Patreon. You can click on the link to pay through PayPal. If you would like to make a one-time donation, you can use your PayPal account or a Visa or credit card. Or like I say, you can go over to Patreon. And for a few dollars a month, you can get access to our records as we receive them, our discussions about them, get our help with your research, and discuss things over on the Patreon.
Right. And I want to just say, and thank you to the people who are contributing financially. And also thank you to all of you who are here every week. Well, when I do a show, and I apologize, I have not been here as much as I would like to be for personal reasons, as most of you know lately, but that we are going to be ramping up again next week. We've got Stephen Greenstreet on the show, so make sure that you are getting information out about this. I apologize for the hiccup in getting you informed about the fact that we're switching to Expanding Frontiers on our YouTube page. We are doing that. Thank you so much, you guys, for finding us over here. We are looking forward to building the channel and all of your support. And so I really, again, I appreciate all of you. And without further ado, I think that we should bring on the guest of honor this evening. And I'm very excited. Yeah, I can see him backstage getting his hat on. And here we have, there we go.
Hey, are you ready for the summer?
Oh, yeah,
Are you ready
baby.
for the hot nights? Are you ready for the burn me? The apple and a whole lot of doing around. What's going on? Thanks for having me on, guys.
Baby.
Binall.
I'm
You need
excited.
to be, that was very profound.
I meant to look up the news. I mean, the lyrics. Excuse me. I look up the news all the time. I meant to look up the lyrics. I was like, oh shit, I don't have them here, so I better just kind of hem and haw as we go along here. After I start with that first line.
Well, you know what? That was very impressive. I have to say, I wish I could think on my feet like that with that, your great talent. So thank you for coming on the show tonight. I'm really excited.
My pleasure. I got some lemonade also to get the Newman's Own, the good kind.
Oh,
yeah, so it's
shizzle.
really starting off the summer here, right? And it's really, that's the first. This is a true carton. So there we go. First lemonade of the summer. So thank you for having me on.
Oh my gosh.
Let's get this long weekend started, guys.
I know that it's a holiday weekend, and I want to just really quickly, we want to get cheers. Got my big thermos of water. It's very exciting. But cheers. You've got lemonade, coffee. We are just so
I think in a previous
it.
life I was like a prop comic or something. So that I was thinking that as I was loading up the lemonade before the show. I'm like, oh, make sure you have the lemonade. Yeah.
That I'm really glad. Lemonade. I don't know how you can keep a straight face when you're drinking lemonade. But I want to really quickly, because we've got someone in that's listening to our audience that is an incredible musician. Mm-hmm. And Jack, will you just tell us a little bit about, because we want to play this song and then we'll get to we'll get to the interview with Tim. I have a feeling it's going to be spicy tonight. Shocking.
Whoa.
Tell us.
I would love to tell you about my friend. He is a great musician. He is Lazer Machine. You can get to his link tree at Lazer with a Z, lazer-machine.com. And from there, you can see Lazer Machine's YouTube videos. You can see his music that he offers. And he has been generous enough to let us segue into the Binall part of the show with letting us share one of his videos that we're going to watch.
All I had to say was in my head. It's in the way. It's getting cold, I'm getting old. It's starting to fall. Dead leaves from the trees. I'm in the car. Getting cold, I'm getting old. It's starting to fall. Dead leaves from the trees. I'm in the car. La 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 la. What I said, la 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 la. All I had to do was think it all out. That's the truth. All I had to play was in my own heart. It's in the way. It's getting cold, I'm getting old. It's starting to fall. Dead leaves from the trees. I'm in the car. Getting cold, I'm getting old. It's starting to fall. Dead leaves from the trees. I'm in the car. La 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 la. That's what I said. La 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 la. It goes on and on and on again. On and on again. It goes on and on and on again. On and on again. It goes. It goes on and on and on again. On and on again. It goes on and on and on again. On and on again. It goes on and on.
Okay, now I can unmute my mic. First of all, I apologize that that wasn't full screen. I need a producer like all the time. But anyway, hold the phone. I'm telling you, this is where my producer needs to come into play, which clearly my imaginary producer is sitting over here and is a complete fail. But anyway, that is such. I love. Well, you know what? We did it. So thank you so much, and I love that song. So Jack, tell me a little bit about does he do his own? Does he does his
all
own
his
video?
all his own stuff? Yeah, he does
Wow.
the videos, he does the recording, all of it. Lazer Machine with a Z. You guys should
That's so
check him
cool.
out.
Nice. Is he on Twitter or the name rings a bell? I feel like.
Yes, he is at DC Flow. Kind of an obscure reference here, but you and I, Tim, were at Jeff Ritzman's memorial on Zoom, and he was at that. He is
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he and Jeff, shared the music interest, and he and Lazer Machine also knows his way around the paranormal community. He knows what's happening in the UFO genre and all. So you might have seen him around there.
Well, he's one of us.
But,
that's a good thing.
Yeah. So Tim,
Yes.
the pioneer of Binnall of America.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
BOA revival. How's that been going, man?
It's been going really great. It's been going really, really well. When I kind of relaunched, I was like, I don't want to just do 6 weeks and get out like I had been doing for the past few years. And I had said on Conspiranormal when I was talking, but right when we launched it, I was like, I'm like, if I can do 6 months, I feel like I've accomplished relatively like I have accomplished reviving this thing. So it's been over 6 months now. I think we're closing in on 7 or 8 months now, and it's been going great. It's a real new experience from when I used to do it almost 20 years ago when I started. So it's just a whole different ball game. It's like just scheduling people is a little more difficult than it used to be, and yeah, it's just different. But I mean, I've been enjoying it. It's just funny because I was thinking the other night when I was putting the list for last night's guest on, the little note that I think has like kind of a format, where it's just like their websites, their name, and some notes. And like always at the very top of the list used to be their phone number because that's how we would do the show. Like I would call them. It just kind of like made me smile or laugh or whatever when I was looking at the notes. That's what reminded me. I'm like, I feel like it's missing something at the phone number. I'm like, oh yeah, I used to always put the phone number on because that's how you call. Like I used to call people, like cold call them and get them to come on the show. People we know, like in ufology and stuff. So it was just wild. So yeah, now it's different. Everybody's online. Everybody's got a podcast, which is like so weird in general because it's like half the time it's like, hey, you want to come on the show? And then they're like, yeah, but I got to do my show like this day. And then how about you come on my show? It's like, all right, okay, sure. But it's just like, wow, this is wild.
Well, I have to tell you, when we were on your show, you are such a great interviewer.
Oh,
you're
thank
just
you very
so
much.
like smooth and funny, and you have so many intelligent questions to ask. That was one of my favorite interviews.
I really enjoyed it too. Yeah, like I said at the end of that one, it was like I think that was like the 5th one I had taped since I started, and I was like, all right, that's the first time I really felt like, okay, this is Binnall of America. Like it was like everything hit on all cylinders. I was just completely in the zone again. So it was.
You were.
You guys really. Yeah, well, it was great. It's great guests. When you have great guests, it makes for great radio. That's what I think. So it's and it's happened over and over like since that episode with other guests and stuff. It's like this is when I have a great guest. I'm really interested in talking to them. It's like the time just goes by so fast you forget you're even doing a show. You think.
Isn't that fun? I mean, that's why
it's the best.
I know. I love talking to people. Clearly, just ask Jack because I can keep him on the phone, forever. But it's like everybody has such a fascinating story, and so like for people that aren't familiar with you, and I'm not quite sure how that could even happen personally, but like give us a little bit about like your background. How did you get into, this crazy topic?
I'll go to the super short version, I guess, but it's like I graduated from college in 2001, Syracuse, and got out of college. My late great father sat me down. He's like, all right, he's handed me one. He's like, here's how much you owe. Handed me like a sheet of paper. Then he handed me the Boston Globe, and he's like, now get a job, like a want ads or whatever. So I ended up getting a job at my old high school as like an overnight janitor, which is a great job if you don't like doing work. So it's like, this is awesome. I only have to work like 3 hours a night, and then I have to just stay in this building till sunrise. And in the process, like 2 years later, really, 9/11 happened. It was like, oh, the world's crazy and everything. 2 years later, 2003, I was like, I was really into Bigfoot. I've always been into Bigfoot. So I picked up, I read some books on Bigfoot, and I was like, and I ended up going back to Barnes & Noble. It's just like how dated this story is. And looking in like the paranormal section, got Rule by Secrecy by Jim Mars, and then Alien Agenda. I read those like vociferously, like immediately, like over the course of the weekend. And then my friends like turned me on. He's like, you're on the overnight. You should be listening to Art Bell. And I'm like, who the fuck is Art Bell? And so then I'm like, wait a minute. There's this paranormal show. It's on the overnight. I work on the overnight. This is crazy. So I spent like my undergraduate years, you could say, just listening to Coast, just listening, not doing it, actually writing about Coast to Coast. So doing these little critiques, but essentially just listening to Coast. Then I was like, I'd like to ask a question to these people. I have a lot of questions for these people. But I'm like, I even though I don't do anything while just sitting around as a janitor, I can't necessarily just sit around on the phone either. It's like even before cell phones, I think. So it was kind of like, I didn't want the school to be like, why were you on the phone with Premier Radio or whatever for 3 hours waiting to get on national radio? So long story short, I was like, I was subscribed to this wrestling website. They would put up like wrestling news audio updates, they were called, and they were MP3s and you would download them. It was like, this is some new kind of file. This is weird. So I'm like, I know what I'll do. I'll call these people. I'll get on a Radio Shack and I'll get a little thing and I splice into my phone and I'll plug it into a digital recorder and I'll record these conversations with Jim Marr, Stan Friedman, Jacques Vallée, John Lear, Lauren Coleman, Brad Steiger, David Icke. The list goes on and on and on. So anyone I could think of in the world of the paranormal, I would just call them up, contact them online if I could find like their info that way, and just record our phone calls and then turn them into MP3s and roll them out. That's why the show was called Binnall of America Audio. There was no podcasting. The term didn't come along until after we started, not because of me or anything. I'm just one of the people who was like early on was like, oh, so you could do something really cool with these MP3 files that are new to me. So that's it. And then I launched Binnall of America, hung around in that sphere for like 10 or 15 years. At some point along the way, Coast to Coast brought me in to do fill-in website work for them. Then they were like, we're going to expand to a day. I had kind of been talking to them about it. It was like, you do anything in the daytime. The website just is dormant all day. Why don't you do news? And so they brought me in to be their news editor. And I've been doing that since late 2015. So coming almost on 10 years now, which is crazy. As the news editor for Coast to Coast AM. So I do that. Then I brought Binnall of America back this past October after kind of going on hiatus for like 3 or 4 years. So that's the long story. That's the history of Binall.
I like it. And I love, somebody was mentioning in chat that you've got such a great voice. Just thanks. Like an old school classic radio voice. You know what I mean? And you do. And I think I love that, especially when you're not doing video. It's like, it's just so important to have a great, colorful voice, and then you're interviewing all of these people. And I've got to ask you, as you sound a lot like Jack and myself, in and of the fact that we became interested in this. And it was like, okay, wow, I remember being in grade school and picking up a book in the library and seeing that UFO on the cover or seeing a Bigfoot book or, whatever. And just thinking, there is something so cool to exploring all of this. My opinions have definitely changed over the decades.
Yeah, same here.
What have been who are some of the most interesting people that you have interviewed?
Oh, sometimes they're like people you wouldn't even think in a way. One person who I really want to make a mention of, I haven't even said this on the show yet, which is crazy. He passed away like in January 2020. It's completely non-paranormal. Kendall Carver. He was the director of the International Cruise Victims Organization. And he passed away right at the start of the pandemic, maybe even from the pandemic. But his daughter disappeared on a cruise ship, and he started this advocacy group for cruise ship victims. And he came on the show. He told this heartbreaking story, and he laid out just shocking information, like more stunning than anything I've probably heard on Binnall of America for paranormal stuff. Like just the sheer insanity of the cruise industry, how it's like these boats are like a little mini city, and something like 30% of the people on the boat are the crew, and they do almost no vetting of the crew. They come from like all over the world. The crew are just people who want to leave their countries essentially, and live on the ocean, and there's no law, there's no like authority on the boat. The captain is the main dude, and he's kind of like a figurehead, but there's no like security really. There's no this like if something happens to you on a cruise ship, and you're like, I want to press charges because rapes happen constantly on these cruise ships. And people disappearing, not so much like murders or something. You really hear about that, but like a lot of sexual assault. So it's like, look, I want to press charges against this short order cook who followed me back to my cabin. They're like, we're going to stop in Jamaica. You can get off and you can talk to the authorities there. And they, we'll start the next stop. Get the fuck off the boat. That's what they say. and you have to, and these victims have to, and there's no the medical is incredibly subpar. There's stories of like people having heart attacks and like being on edge on and they're on a gurney and they're like, all right, we're pulling up to Kirks and Taco, whatever it is, and or the Dominican Republic or whatever, some island, wherever the next stop is on the cruise, and we're just gonna roll you off. And, we called ahead. There'll be an ambulance waiting for you. We're just going to roll you off. And good luck in Kirks and Tacos. But I keep saying I'm wrong with.
Well,
Turks and Caicos. Good luck with Turks and Caicos. And we'll that's the last you'll hear from us because we're on our way to Puerto Rico. So it's and really, you talk about spicy. I will kind of slam some certain sectors of ufology. This man legitimately testified before Congress about the issues surrounding the cruise ship. This was like around the same time as the fake congressional UFO hearings. Now they have real ones since then, but this was back when they did that whole elaborate Washington fake out thing where it's like, you remember that? Yeah. So it was like
citizens hearing. Yeah.
Yes, the citizens hearing. Yeah. So this guy was a legitimate congressional witness, and so that one like just really blew my mind because I had never thought about it. I always tell people now, I'm like, I'd never go on one of those cruises. Because he was like saying this unlimited alcohol. I'm like, well, shit, that sounds pretty good. But then it's like, well, yeah, but you just unlimited alcohol and you're just completely unsupervised. You wander around anywhere on the boat at night, on the edge. It's like people go over all the time. They try to put in regulations for like systems in place to detect people that fell over and like whatever. And they like cruise ship industry like, no. We're not doing this. We can't afford it or whatever. And it was like, dude, it's like $1 million or whatever. It's not, you guys are making tons and tons of money. You could easily put in these safety restrictions. So that one, that was, I put that sort of like in my top 5 of like shows where I was just like, wow, this is really, really something and something I never thought I would get into, via all this.
But look how important like that. I mean, and that just you saying that absolutely. I mean, you hear news about different things that are happening on cruise ships and people being abandoned with medical injuries and things, and then you do start to wonder, okay, what's going on, behind the scenes, and you're bringing up really incredible points that will make me probably not want to be, taking a cruise. I wasn't really a big cruiser to begin with, but those when you are like you're floating out in the middle of the ocean and there are no laws. That is a really concerning thing. And I bet that was a very eye-opening and profound show for you to get that on the record.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you hit on it there. I think it was probably like the most important show that I ever did. That was, I had Kendall back on a couple more times just because it was so compelling. And I really became sort of an advocate in a way for like at least alerting people to the dangers of these situations, because like you, I never really even gave it much thought. You see him on TV, you're like, that looks fun as hell, and then it's like, oh man, there's a lot of dangers there. There's a lot of danger. It's I mean, I'm sure it's safe for like 95% of the people, but it's like you don't want to be in that 5% because it's like it's worse than running into a problem if you're on vacation in Orlando or whatever. It's like you're in the middle of the ocean, dude.
Yeah, that's just like anarchy in the Atlantic or something.
Yeah.
And then
throw in the UFO cruise too. That could be
right. Yeah. And like you say, it's not going to happen most of the time, but you occasionally see them on the news that like such and such cruise line has just been adrift for 4 weeks now. Or something.
Yeah. Yeah, there's all those other weird mechanical issues too. Yeah.
And I would imagine too that a lot of that doesn't even make the media, make the news. I bet a lot of that
really, I don't think. No. And certainly not like I don't know how often people go overboard, but it's like people disappear on these things, and it's not I don't think all of them make the news. Like it happens.
Certainly not. No,
I imagine it's kind of like the missing person thing, where it's like if you're a young woman or like I don't know a suburban like white young dude, like maybe like a college kid, like maybe then they'll be like, oh, this college kid from Rutgers went overboard, but if it's like, oh no, if you're just the average schlub, and like if I went overboard, I don't even know if it would make the news. They'd be like, oh well, what do you expect? It's like fucking unlimited
Well,
alcohol.
we'd figure that out. Jack and I would figure that out. You've got
I
us.
appreciate that.
We'd be
A
on
lot
it.
of people would miss you. And so I want to ask, because Peter wants me to ask you what happened to the lady that had the initial, what happened with her? What was her story? Can you elaborate?
Well, yeah. She went overboard and her remains were eventually found. And they were relatively recently found prior to Kendall's death. And I'm almost certain, because I think I would have remembered that, that at the time he didn't have the answers for what happened. But then he did before he died. But sometime after I last talked to him. So it's like, I interviewed him sometime after that, our last interview, the remains were found, and then he passed away. So he at least got some answers. But the whole thing with his daughter was like, he wanted the videos from the cruise ship because they have cameras everywhere. And the cruise ship wouldn't give the videos to them. They kept making all these excuses, and he had to go to court and kept going to court and like suing, kind of like what you guys have to do with these characters with their conference in Utah. He just kept like hounding them and being like, and finally I don't even know if he ever got them, honestly. I think they were destroyed or something. I think it came to some kind of thing where, he never really got any visual evidence of what happened to his daughter. So, yeah.
That's so sad that
things
like that can happen. And even when you're, here, and you have a police department or you have officials that are supposed to be a judicial system, things can get, obviously there's a lot that can go under the radar or can be kind of obfuscated from the public view. So that's really, really sad. So thank you for asking, for answering that question. And so, to give us another example, because that was such a great example, like talk about a couple other interviews.
Okay, one of the more famous ones that I've done is again, I don't know what you'd call this, but it was like kind of paranormal. Colin O'Reilly. It's probably one of the more famous Binnall of America episodes, simply because of just how bizarre it is. His whole, he had other things. I'll get to that later, but his whole thing was that that horses eat meat. That was his whole thing. Horses eat meat. Meat eating horses. That was the whole shtick. And the book, I think, is man eating horses, or something along those lines, where it's like they bite, they'll eat meat, and he just had that example after example of horses eating meat, and how the powers that be. And I don't know, mainstream science and just common understanding, I guess you would say, is against the idea of meat eating horses. And he's like, yeah, and it was just so weird. He had so much information and I'm like listening to him, and I'm like, I don't really have a dog in the fight, so I guess horses. What do I like? I'm not emotionally attached to the idea that they can't eat meat, and he's just like telling all these stories about like people who saw horses attack animals and eat them and stuff, and I'm just like, wow, this is pretty wild. Yeah, meat eating horses. Yeah, so that's one that became famous just simply just because of the weirdness of it. It was just like meat eating horses. All right, let's do it. That's always been sort of bit of like my credo, where it's just like there's no topic I really won't explore where I'm like, okay, I really want, like, I don't like, where I'm like, that's too wild or too weird. Like wild and weird is right up my alley. So it's like I'm proud to say I've done 2 different death hoax episodes. I did a Michael Jackson death hoax one, where a woman who insists that Michael Jackson faked his death, and she has it all figured out. So so that's Pearl Jr. God bless her. And I forget Mickey Moran. Wow, I'm on target tonight. Mickey Moran did the Elvis death hoax. And that was a great episode. It was really fascinating because to me, what I want to know and what he provided, I really don't believe, I brought right off the top. I'm like, dude, there's no, even if Elvis faked his death, he's got to be dead by now. now because he'd be like 100 or something, man. So, what fascinated me is I was like, he knew the history of this crazy fucking theory, and I honestly think I don't know if we've talked about this, but like, this sounds so, oh God, sorry. But just that episode with the Elvis death hoax, I think, kind of was my prelude to my foray into the flat Earth. So that was because I was so fascinated by, okay, Mickey, where did this come from? Like, where is this Elvis death hoax come from? And he kind of laid it out and how it started, like, obviously after Elvis died. And it was sort of like, it was like a weird thing, like from the zine community, and it developed like this weird underground kind of thing, and there were newsletters and everything, and it was like a real, for a brief period of time, it was like a real, I don't know, a parapolitical movement, I don't know, like conspiracy movement, like in its own little world, like with celebrities and like different people, power players in the Elvis death hoax community and stuff, and little by little they drop off, and I think Mickey and maybe a couple other people are the modern day people keeping it going. But it was, to me, that was like really fascinating. It's like you talk about I don't have the time or the energy to write a book, but that would, if I was going to write a book, that would be one that I would probably think about exploring. Like, there's an interesting, like, what was this subculture like? I want to read those newsletters. Like, I want to read those Elvis death hoax newsletters. Elvis faked his death. Like, how could you have that every week or every month or whatever? Like, how could you even fill that after like 6 issues? I don't know, but it's fascinating. I want to read the letters to the editor in those newsletters. I bet you they're awesome. So
I bet you they are.
Yeah. The Elvis death hoax.
Wow. And I mean, that just there. Has there ever been a point in time when you were interviewing somebody that you were concerned about your safety?
Oh no, never. No.
I mean, because I will tell you, I mean, perhaps it's just because I've had some special experiences in my time in this subject, but
there was one actually. This is very benign. That's why I almost didn't mention it. I interviewed a guy. I want to say his last name was Kennedy. This was super early in Binnall of America's run, like in season 2 or 3. So forgive me, Mr. Kennedy. I forget your first name, and he has since passed away. Also, well, we have like a frightening in memoriam at Binnall of America. It's kind of depressing because we started so long ago. We've lost so many former guests to the point now people will be like laugh about it. People have been on all the time. They're like, oh shit. But anyway, I was interviewing this Mr. Kennedy. He was a vehement conspiracy theorist, sort of like New World Order-y kind of, just kind of in the general vein of that from what I can recall. There may have even been like a satanic element mixed in there, but just sort of like, just sort of like the bad guys are out to get you kind of conspiracy theorist. Of that era in a way too, of that like 9/11, post 9/11, Bohemian Grovian kind of like mood that people were in, like 2001 to, maybe late 2008 or whatever. So, of that ilk. And so we finished the interview, and this was like late. It was like, I think we started at like 10. We went to maybe 12:30 or something like that. It was late. Might have even been later because it was late enough that it was like in the overnight hours. So I go out to get something after the show was over, like get a drink or whatever. And I looked outside, and there was like a car or a vehicle, like I don't know if it was a van or a car or whatever, but like right out in front of my house, like just kind of idling. And I'm like, what the fuck I'm like, who's that out there? And then I like looked out the window, and then they drove away. And I was like, okay, that fucking was creepy, because this guy was just talking about like, you don't want to cross these people kind of stuff.
It is a really interesting topic, and you do run into some to people that are, I had a fellow, I'm trying to think about maybe 7 years ago, that I was introduced to from somebody at MUFON, and he had a radio show, and he ended up, just stalking me, going to different conferences, threatening to kill me. It was a very interesting experience. And so maybe, the female thing, I'm sure does not help at all, but I have had some very interesting experiences in my time with people that you get come into your
Right.
orbits and
I've not,
things.
I've not ever felt like, physically threatened. I have had like, I mean, if you're in this long enough, you just have bad encounters with people. Like you just have them. And, sometimes like if this, sometimes there's like local people, they listen to the show or you're nearby, we'll grab a drink or whatever. And most of the time they turn out all right. Then you get people that kind of like are a little askew. And I like befriended one person for a while, and he seemed pretty cool. And then he sent me like a UFO article once, and I'm like, oh, I don't really, that doesn't really, I don't buy it. So I said, and because it was like they found some kind of thing, one of those things. It happens all the time. And he was like, oh, I bet you'd give more, you'd have more of an open mind about this story if one of your UFO celebrity friends sent it to you. And I'm just like, no, dude, I'd fucking tell them the same thing. But that was it. Then I'm like, how can you treat a fan this way? And I'm like, bro, you had been at my house. I'm like, you're no longer a fan, man. You're a friend. And now I don't think that's the case at all. So I think you should just go. So it was very, so these things happen,
Yes, they do. That's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And so have you, obviously you've mentioned that your views have changed about things, over the years. Were you, tell us that process and talk about where you were when you first got into this and where you are now.
Well, I really, because I had been interested as a kid, then I got back into it from listening to Coast when I was a janitor. So it was like, I hadn't really followed the scene all that time. So I was like, at first, this is kind of funny. This is like one of my favorite stories of sort of coming up, but it was like one of the first people I heard a lot from was Steve Bassett. And he was like super obviously into disclosure and everything. And I, as a person, I can identify with these people who came in 2017 in a way, because coming into it around the turn of the century, I was like, oh, I'm hearing about how things are happening. This time it's for real. And I'm like,
it's finally happening.
Yeah. So when you first come in, if you catch on that wave, man, good luck. So I was like that. I was like, oh, well, they must have, I haven't looked at this UFO thing since I was at elementary school. So clearly they must be super close to figuring this thing out. So I kind of just took him at his word, I suppose. And it was like, and then I was like, I want to see these people. So, and actually Jim Mars got me into this through Rule by Secrecy, Alien Agenda. Steve Bassett put on an event. And I think if this happens, if we could go back in time, I think you two would fucking be there with me. It was like the EXO X conference in 2004, so 20 years ago. And it was just like a Woodstock of UFO people. It was awesome for speakers. It was like I wish I could pull it up here, but it was like Stan Friedman, Linda Moulton Howe, Jim Mars, Rich Dolan, Nick Redfern, Tim Good. And I'm sure I'm leaving a ton of people out, but like just everybody who was anyone in ufology at the time was on the bill. And it was like 3 days long. It was, so for someone who was just kind of new to this, I'm like, I want to see all the stars. I want to go. It was like WWE. I'm like, I want to go to this WrestleMania of ufology, and I want to see these people in action. Peter Robbins was there. It's the first time I met Peter Robbins. And it was eye-opening, man. It was just eye-opening. And to tell you how out of place I was, I remember I just gotten out of college. So I'm like, I'll bring some resumes and fucking just give them to people but it was just so out of place. And now if I was at an event, someone handed me a resume, I'm like, you're at a fucking paranormal event, dude. What do you think? What do you think? you're gonna
Wow,
do
though,
here.
that's a really good example, though, of like how the public should interpret. It's a conference. I
Yeah.
guess that'll be a good place to make professional contacts, is a reasonable thing to surmise. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I thought. Yeah. But it turned out that it was really as we would expect, sort of like the dog and pony show that is the paranormal. It was just like no one's getting jobs for anything. It's just kind of like it was yeah, it was interesting. It was really cool. There was a guy there I wanted to get. I don't think I've told a lot of these stories. There was a guy there who he wanted me to. He had a radio show. This is back like before podcasts. This is even before I started podcasting. So like there was no even concept of like, oh, you can just do this over the internet. So he was on the radio. This is kind of like a classic shiesty example of ufology. So he was like, he wanted essentially, he's like trying to convince me to fund his show and put like pay him like 500, give him $500 like a month so he could keep broadcasting in Texas or wherever he was, like on some little pinochle station. And it was just like, bro, why would like, you know, like why would I give you money to like, I don't care enough about this to like just throw money away, just, you know, like an idiot. But it was like, it's classic sort of like that, the scene, man. It's like, oh, you flew all the way down here from Boston. So maybe you'd be interested in, you know, and you got these resumes. It's like, we could really do something here, guy. All I need you to do is give me $500 a month and I can, you know, get this UFO show, stay on the air down in Texas or Florida. I forget which one it was, or, you know, but it doesn't matter. But anyway, that was just kind of like, oh, dude, this is like, obviously I didn't give him a dime, but I'm like, this is a wake up call. Like, there's really no money to be made in this.
Right. And it is interesting when you go to, you know, a conference like you're mentioning. I remember, I think I did speak at UFO Congress a few years ago, and that was again like the who's who, and we've got the little, you know, the parties up in the rooms and all sorts of, you know, I mean, it's always been funny when I've been at different conferences to see I mean, it's, you know, the handful of people that you just mentioned, and, you know, then they've got lines of adoring women who are, you know, wanting to get their book signed by specific people, and just this. I mean, definitely, it's like I got the feeling from some of the conferences I went to, it was like people that never got attention in high school, that are now suddenly like famous in this world, and it's like they don't know what to do because, oh my goodness, all these women are. It's just like it's such a trip. I need to, if I don't know, I would love to go and just kind of document some of those things that you see
the weirdness
at these conferences.
Yeah, well, I think it's like people who do like want to be famous, kind of, and it's like, but they're not really famous, so they're famous like that Saturday in Baltimore. And it's like, this is like, otherwise they go back to their humdrum lives doing whatever. So it's like, all right, on this weekend in Baltimore, I'm a star. And it's like, all right, it's basking it, dude. Go for it. You know, it's pretty wild.
It's so interesting. And so oh, go ahead, Jack.
Thank you. I wanted to say that kind of takes us, Tim. You get around. You go to live events, some regionally up in the Massachusetts area. You're a regular at our friend Adam Sain's Conspiranormal. What's your takeaway from some of that? Like, what would you tell people about the speaker circuit and about getting out and going to these events?
Well, I would say go if you can. Like, definitely go, you know, go. If there are events around you, go. I try to me, there's nothing better just than the lived experience. I've kind of come to that realization as I've gotten older and started traveling more and everything. But to me, the conferences, the best times are the down times. So, I mean, that would be my advice, I suppose. Like, if you want to go, if you go with people you want to like really meet and kind of pick their brains and stuff, because you get the chance to talk to them and everything. I feel like I'm notorious for like among the conspiranormal people, Strange Realities conferences. I just can't even stay and sit like for long in one of these things. They're just too. They're just so long. They're just so long. I just don't have the attention span to like sit and watch like a 45-minute presentation. And I feel terrible because I'm doing like I do one at the very start of the thing, and I'm like, I hope you're all paying attention. but once I'm done, I'm like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. I can't. If I have to look at one more slide, I'm gonna. If I hear next slide, please, one more time, someone's gonna get hurt. But yeah, no. So I mean, really, this is so counterintuitive, but I would also just recommend people, if they really just go and do shit, like go and see things on your own. You don't have to necessarily go to a conference. Like or also festivals. I'm much more into festivals now because I feel like that whole thing with you sitting, and that's just part of it. Then you can do a whole bunch of other stuff. But I should work for the West Virginia Tourism Bureau, because I was talking about this last night on my show. I'm going to repeat it here. And I've told everybody this. The dream, if you can, you just fly to Charleston, West Virginia. You can drive an hour to the west and you get to Point Pleasant. Come back, spend the night in Charleston. You drive an hour the other way and you're at Flatwoods. And it's like you can hit two of the most iconic cases in one weekend. And then there's the Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, because there's not much to do in Flatwoods after you go to Flatwoods. There's a Bigfoot museum there. There's a Flatwoods museum there, like a block apart. It's really, really cool. So, yeah, I recommend people just do that and go. I have a group of friends that we go called Paramania. It's kind of like an underground thing, only because we're lazy and we don't want to really manage a whole bunch of people. We just go to different places every year to see the paranormal bucket list spots, like Dealey Plaza. That's how it all started. We went to Dallas and saw Dealey Plaza, and went to Aurora, where the alien is buried. And talk about a magical day. Daniel, I forget his last name. I apologize, Daniel. I want to say Johnson, but Daniel something. He's a Texas UFO researcher. Right. He was good friends with Jim Mars. Brought Jim Mars out to the Aurora Cemetery. Jim had done presentations on the Aurora alien because he lived nearby. He had done this. He was part of his portfolio of conference presentations. Essentially, did the presentation for us. In the Aurora graveyard. It was like, this is magical, man. This is magical. This is really something else. So yeah, I'm incredibly lucky to have had that experience. But that's kind of like, go see, like if you're interested in the mob, man, go check out the thing. If you're, go to Dealey Plaza, or like go wherever this case that interests you might be. You don't necessarily have to. And also, if you can, just kind of hit up whoever's in the area for people that might be like an expert or whatever. You can learn a lot doing that. If you're like, I'm going to go out to Dallas, there's got to be someone who can take me down to Dealey Plaza and give me the rundown on it. Another great, this kind of became a theme of these weekends that we have. But it's like, we're down in New Orleans. Now I forgot his name now. Oh man. Ken Thomas. There you go. I'm getting older, folks. I'm starting to forget names. It's frightening. It's happened a lot lately. Ken Thomas came down to New Orleans while we were down there. We went out, oddly enough, another graveyard trip. We went out to Jim Garrison's grave, and he gave us the whole rundown on Jim Garrison and his role in the JFK assassination and everything. So you can, you can do that, folks. Everybody can do that kind of thing. It's just takes a little initiative and wherewithal.
And you mentioned Daniel and Aurora, Texas, and I have to say that I actually had a tour from Daniel. I was with Nick Redfern, nice. And Nick drove me down, and Daniel met us there, and we had quite the time in the cemetery. And different. I mean, that was just it is interesting to go to some of these places and see it. And then I think a lot of times in your mind, you think it's something that it clearly isn't when you get there. And so it is, it's interesting for sure.
Yeah. Like, I always, I'm going up to Exeter tomorrow, just for the holiday weekend, just to
that'd be nice.
Get away. And, like up in Exeter, you can go to like the spot where the guy saw the UFO. So it's like, if that's the case, just you go and check it out. You could really, it's better than any book.
Yeah,
I'll pose this question to each of you. I was saying earlier, Tim, that in my social circles, the two people that I would say have interviewed the most people, got the, everybody that's anybody on speed dial would be you and Erica. So I'll ask Tim first, and then Erica, you please think about it while he's answering. What would you say is the takeaway from what you've learned from talking to all these folks, from digesting the things they tell you, that your podcasts and interviews have just turned from hours to weeks to, I mean, you've literally got, I would even say years of content if people put all your interviews, lined them up together. What would you say you feel like are some of the things that you've learned from it?
Oh boy. That's a rich question. Well, I guess that we just really aren't any closer to solving this stuff than we were when I first started, which is like, so almost 20 years. So I can for people who just kind of got into it, I can safely say, as someone who's been in it for like the last 20 years, nothing has changed. Like, there's been no, and that's a very broad statement, and it may bother people, whatever, but it's like, generally speaking, we're not any closer to knowing what the deal with the UFOs are or what's behind them. Bigfoot is still out running around or doesn't exist. Like, ghosts are like the weather. Everybody kind of fucking knows about ghosts, so it's not even really. But no one's like, there's been no one's like captured a ghost or kind of had some. There's been no definitive proof, no like breakthrough moment. In all these big, huge tentpole mysteries, and even into the conspiracy realm, because like when I started, it was really post 9/11, so there was a lot more conspiracy that we were doing back then than we do now. Now I just do fun conspiracies because the political conspiracies got really dark. But even then, even if you take it, like, the bad guy hasn't been taken down from the conspiracy theorist world. Like, we haven't taken down the New World Order or anything like that. So there's been no sort of sea change, and you have to come to accept that at some point in your journey, and then just float and just kind of do your thing and just accept the fact that like nothing's really ever gonna resolve itself in this field, and you have to kind of look for your own questions, look for new questions that beyond like what are these things? Is Bigfoot real? Like, are ghosts real? Like, you got to get way beyond that and deeper into like, okay, what if Bigfoot's this or that or the other thing, or like what if these UFOs aren't even real at all? What if it's all a big government deal? Like, you have to kind of start to really get into the nooks and crannies of this stuff, to sort of find enjoyment of it. At least that's kind of or enrichment, because once you get past the first questions, that's the journey.
Thank you. How about you, Erica? What would you say you've learned?
It's different. My experience, as everybody knows, and the whole free world knows, because I've been very open about my experiences, but I went from somebody that had this insatiable, and I still do, like, longing for an adventure, longing, I love traveling different places. I love sitting by a hearth in Ireland and talking to a castle owner of, this allegedly, haunted place that I find out was actually all for tourism. I love, all of the adventures that I've have had, but there are some really dark and dangerous people that are involved in this. And when you get into kicking over rocks and things, it's not necessarily a good, safe, healthy place to be. And I think that at the end of the day, like Tim is saying, we're never going to know the answers to questions. And I personally think a lot of the questions that have been put forward to the public were obviously done to hide other things. And I do not believe, I will say right now, from where I was 30 years ago, when I first picked up 40 years ago, when I first picked up a book in the school library, I do not believe that extraterrestrials are here. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. I've researched enough. I'm not just saying this because I'm bitter and jaded, even though I might be bitter and jaded. But
just to back you up, I am increasingly feeling the same way. I am increasingly feeling the same way, where it's like, maybe this fucking alien thing isn't even all it's cracked up to be at all. Maybe this is not at all the case. So yeah.
I mean, I absolutely, nobody has shown a lick of evidence to me that I can say is definitive proof. And these days, I want proof. And I'm 20 feet away from the Ann Druffel, all of her files, and she spent 50, 60 years, talking with major players in major organizations. And, and at the end of her life, she said to her daughter, said, Mom, what do you think now? And she said, show me a body and show me a craft.
Yeah.
And that's her whole life of meticulously documenting and researching and talking to people. And she came to that conclusion. And I think, I do require, there is a burden of proof that is on the claimant. That's what I know Jack says that all the time. And so show me your proof, because I'm to the point where I've seen so many people promoting absolute garbage that I don't buy it. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, like I know also that I've had experiences I can't explain. They're personal to me. I don't know if I'll be able to explain them 10 years from now, but they hold a meaning to me. And I personally don't think they're anybody's business. And I don't need to look to the public or any group or organization to tell me what has meaning from my personal experiences. And I think the real danger that people have is when they start turning to groups of people and they're, we're being told that we're being abducted by, aliens, and that we're chosen and that we're here to, do all of this stuff that is just absolute nonsense and dangerous, in my opinion. And so I think if you have experiences, like I mentioned, I have, but hold those very close, be guarded with what you share in public, and know that now, especially like when you get onto any of these Facebook, Twitter pages, blah, 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 you have no freaking idea who you're talking to. Be careful when you go to conferences. It's like being in a cruise ship. You're entering the land of Lord knows what's going to happen when you get a few too many cocktails in you. So just be mindful. I've learned a lot. I've met a lot of wonderful people like both of you and the people in chat. It's been it's been an experience for sure, but I don't believe extraterrestrials are here. And I'm sorry, guys, I'm really sorry. That's my truth. That is the truth. So prove it otherwise. Thank you for letting me share.
As Jack knows, I have a certain mantra that's pretty much of the same. So,
that's why I laugh.
Show me the effing aliens. Just show me the effing aliens. I've heard enough. Like these people talk till they're blue in the face. Show it. Show us the alien. If you're that, it's I don't know if it was when you guys were on the show or if I even made this point to you, but like they say this is like the greatest story of all time. If it is, shouldn't someone with the access to the aliens want to be the one who is? There has to be someone who wants to be the one who's like, here's the alien, here's the fucking alien, and hold it up and be like, tackle me, take me away to Guantanamo Bay, but there's the alien, there's the alien. Like, and change the world.
Yeah, I think you're both certainly correct that no one has given you or the public conclusive evidence that would lead them to make any such conclusion. I back in the early '90s, I wanted to see them like Tim was saying. You know, when you've read their books and you've seen them on TV and all, it's like, oh wow, there he is, John Mack, Bud Hopkins, right here in the same room, and
Yeah, yeah.
you go and you check it out, and it was a fever pitch. Gulf Breeze 6 had just been arrested in the Panhandle, and Bill Moore went nuts at a MUFON gig, and all that had just gone on. And it was a fever pitch, and all it ever got me was being the weird guy at work, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
You know, all that stuff in your head, and you're waiting any day now. Let's check the news. Did it happen yet? Still waiting, guys. Still waiting.
Yeah.
Well, and two, I want to just say that it is interesting, with a place like Skinwalker Ranch, or, a place where they're allegedly seeing strange things. Like, you get primed. People get primed. They're continually hearing, this is happening, so they could go to a specific location and see, a helicopter, and it's, oh my Lord, the ET is here, and the portals are opening up, and, all of this stuff. So there's so much to all of this. And we just, I can't think of, I don't know. I think that it's been a great learning curve for me. And I know that I keep talking about it and I keep addressing this because it's a fascinating history. Like the whole, I love it. Like, I'm never going to not have an interest in it. It's fascinating for many, many levels. And now
absolutely.
we look at what's, taking place, like, politically, and how UFOs are, all of this stuff is intersecting with everything. And I know earlier in chat, people have kind of mentioned that, less than 1% of the population cares about the subject. And that is very, very true. But I think the interesting thing, and the thing that we need to give a little credit here to, is the fact that this is being talked about by people in Congress. This is, you look at Tim Burchett's, Twitter page, and this is every other, it's the illegal aliens coming across the border. It's, the ET, distrust the government. This, whether we like it or not, this subject is becoming mainstream. It's on Tucker Carlson. It's, here and there and everywhere. And we need to, I think we've made the mistake over the past 70 years of not taking this subject and the gravity of what could be done in the name of this subject seriously. And I got to go back and kind of point a finger at some of the old timers that knew about things like with the NICAP emailing list, going to a Nazi more than once, things like that we've chosen not to. Old timers, I've luckily, a couple of them that I'm friends with have mentioned, but there are a lot of things that we let slip. Yeah. And that is why this subject has been such a clown show. And it will continue to become more and more dangerous unless we're really talking about some of these things and, and understanding that this is going mainstream, and it ain't good. So let's just be real.
It's the thing too, that like it's good, clean fun to like visit Point Pleasant and go, wow, these are the streets John Keel walked down when it was a fresh mystery and he was trying to get pictures and figure it out. And then it's another thing altogether that people are like storming the ramp, the compound, like maniacs, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's a byproduct because I'm on Twitter all the time, but yeah, it's troubling. I think of people who like, a lot of times I'll see them arguing like you, Jack, and I'll be like, who is this asshole? And I'll click their thing. And it's just a long, like, it's just UFO, all UFO. And it's like, if I hope you're a bot or something, or like, a paid for shill or of some kind, because if you're an actual person who just stays on Twitter and just tweets about UFOs like all day long, like I feel bad for you. You need to stop. And you need to as the kids say, touch grass. Like you gotta, it's worrisome.
Yeah, like let's kind of transition with that into
And hold on, so no one thinks I'm picking on them. That goes for like people into all kinds of other stuff too.
Right.
So
Right.
it's like if you're tweeting about the fucking Bachelor all day, every day, you also need to go touch grass. Like,
yeah.
so like a slam on UFO people. It's more of a slam on social media. It's like you gotta disconnect.
Yeah, one of the reasons I started from my personal Twitter account tweeting more about sports was so it would be clear, present myself as a more multi-dimensional person, that it's not just bam, 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 the same one thing all the time. And Tim is a big Boston Celtics fan, so
yes.
you gotta be feeling good right now about that, huh?
Looking good. I'm feeling good. It's kind of like you don't want to feel too you don't want to like how you.
Oh, hey, I'm a Doc Rivers fan, so I know about getting overconfident.
Yeah. So I'm kind of like, well, it's going the way it should be. So let's see how it turns out. It's weird. They've been expected to win the whole time, so it's a very odd feeling from previous years where it was like, oh, this year they kind of have a puncher's chance if the ball bounces the right way. Like when they got all the way to face Golden State a few years ago, it was like they got a puncher's chance in this. This is kind of like, I didn't expect this. This year, it's like they're expected to go all the way.
It's theirs to lose.
Right. Yeah. So I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop kind of feeling. It's just like, all right, well, they've been in the driver's seat the whole time. So, yeah.
And I'll throw this out as long as we're talking about it. In the wintertime, on Twitter, we do a free NFL pick'em pool. And when I say free, it's really free. No money gets exchanged. And Tim's very good at that. He often wins it, or at least ties for the win at the end of the season, where you just pick the winners each week.
Awesome.
And I also bring that up because there's some guys in chat like Michael Reynolds and Tom that often play along. And so everybody's welcome to join us on that. But Tim's very good at that.
I'm 3-time champion or co-champion. So I've been at the top of the mountain at the end of every brew pool season so far. Sometimes I have to share it, but definitely I've been the champion 3 straight years. So we need some competition in the brew pool, Jack. So maybe this will be the call out for next season.
Right.
I might have to join you boys, give you something to think about.
Oh, that'd be fun.
You're welcome to take your shot.
I'm a big talker. Yeah. What does that mean, Jet? Really?
It means you're invited to participate. Is what
okay.
It means.
No, you're being a little spicy. I sent some competition brewing. All right. That's all it takes. You're totally hosed now, my friend.
I probably am.
I'm just kidding.
You're right.
Jack takes it seriously. He crunches the numbers and everything. He's Jack. We talk on in chat or whatever often, and Jack's fastidious in his stats, especially this basketball season. He's always pointing out like, well, this guy had a lot of rebounds the last game, so he's probably not going to have this many this time, and his shooting percentage is a little off, but it's always off when they are in New Orleans for some reason. So it's like, oh, how does he
Oh, it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating that you can look down and see what a batter does against one pitcher in one town and then how it'll be different somewhere else. Yeah, cool. It fascinates me. Yeah.
Well, boys, this has been really fun. And Tim, you've got to come back because
I'd be happy
so much
to. I had a blast.
Okay.
This was fun.
Because I think the three of us, I love our conversations just from being on your show, and from having you
this
here.
is 2 in a row now that we've had a great conversation. So we're on a hot streak.
I love it.
But this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. And I hope you have a safe and fun Memorial Day weekend. I can't even believe it's Memorial Day. It's like,
I know.
Okay.
In
That's
the
right.
show description, you guys can find links to Lazer Machine. You can also find links to Tim's YouTube channel that you guys should subscribe to and get his old BOA episodes that are going up, as well as what new is coming in. Where else can folks find you, Tim?
Well, as I said earlier, I'm the news editor for Coast to Coast AM. That's my full-time job. So if people want paranormal news, I think I'm the best paranormal news outlet out there, to be quite fucking honest with you. And I really mean that, because I slave away to try to find the most obscure and international stuff that people aren't picking up anywhere else. Like I did a story a couple of weeks ago. I still am surprised. I don't think it's been picked up in the English media anywhere, English speaking media, but the congressman, a senator from Chile, says he was an alien abductee and said he was taken by a UFO, transported like 500 miles or 100 miles, something, in the blink of an eye. And then he was visited the next day in his office by a guy claiming to be an alien, and he hadn't told anybody about what happened the night before. Yeah. And that's up at the Coast to Coast AM website from like 2 weeks ago. But that's the kind of stuff I'm trying to dig up there, like really obscure, weird stuff that's happening elsewhere in the world, not like the latest pull quote from Tim Burchett. Like I really try not to cover that stuff too much, because it's kind of just repeating. It's like I'd rather hear about this Chilean senator who says he was abducted by an alien. That's pretty wild. So
That
yeah,
could be
so
interesting.
Coast to Coast AM.com. That's where you can find the news and the articles written by yours truly.
Well, thank you. You're fascinating, and I love your stories.
Oh,
And Jack,
thank
go
you.
ahead.
I'm just glancing through chat, and Amy, you can hit me up at jackbrewerblog@yahoo.com. That's jackbrewerblog@yahoo.com. And thanks for everybody for being in chat. We really appreciate you guys.
Yeah, and thanks for rolling with my editing, with my sweet production skills. I'm telling you, it's just got to give myself some props there. I'm the master at unmute and mute.
I
But
feel like
thank
an
you.
idiot because I just realized I could look at the chat on the side. I'm like, I wish I could have seen that chat tonight. And then I'm like,
But you know what?
oh,
Though? I mean, like honestly,
like, oh,
sometimes
what's
it's
that
better
thing?
not to
And
see
then
the chat. Like you just roll with
Yeah.
it. And things
Yeah.
that I also want to just say, because there's been some confusion, and I apologize that I haven't communicated effectively with the transition that we're making now to the Expanding Frontiers Research page on YouTube. So you can go there to see our Expanding Frontiers Research shows from now on, and make sure you click like, subscribe. And as Jack was mentioning, there's show notes that link everything to Tim, all of his great work. And yeah, thanks all of you guys for your support and your love, and you guys rock. So anything else, Jack? Are you groovy?
Thanks to everybody, and thank you, Tim. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys, and thanks to everybody who tuned in. Also, have a great holiday weekend.
Thanks you guys. Take care. All right, you guys, Tim and Jack, really interesting conversations. I want to thank all of you again, as I did at the beginning of the show, for being supportive of me through certain things that I'm going through. I have to say that this is such a respectful and wonderful group of people that we can have interesting conversations in chat. You can ask respectful questions, and that we're all here supporting each other. So thank you for everything. I hope you guys have a safe weekend. We will catch you next Friday with Stephen Greenstreet, so you can make sure that that's going to be another one for the memory books. All right, you guys have a wonderful weekend.